By the summer of 1911, we had moved into a larger home. The white Victorian in the center of town with a large front yard separated from the road by a picket fence. Like others, it had a wide porch, and its trim was a wrought of elaborate scrollwork. It was a far cry from the small cottage we had started out in. Mother no longer worked with Aunt Lily at the hotel because her medium business was so good. But Mimi and I started to work there as helpers, doing whatever Auntie Lily needed. We were at the hotel the night it became the first building in Spiritville to be wired with electricity. After months of renovation, gas jets, we capped the electric wiring was installed. In 1893, Tesla demonstrated wireless electricity at the Chicago World's Fair. Why aren't they using that? I asked Mimi as we stood with Emma and Amelie, looking at the hideous wires defacing our beautiful town. I don't know, Mimi replied. Suddenly, she clasped her hands over her mouth and her eyes went wide. She was looking at Amelie, whose hair had become electrified and stood practically on end. Thousands of small wisps danced around her face and made her laugh. Amelie, you look so funny, Emma cried as she hugged her. Instantly, Emma's hair began to dance around her head as well. Mimi and I tried touching them, but nothing happened. Why don't our hair stand up like that? Asked Mimi. She shook her head, mystified. Those two are on a wavelength all their own, was the only explanation she could offer. Nearly everyone in town came out to see the spectacle sight of the Spirit Hotel glowing like a giant firefly in the night. I stood there with others and wondered at the magic of electricity. If light could travel through wires, perhaps a spirit could find a way to move along secret paths as well. An article I showed Mother one day talked about how Tesla felt that disease could be cured by vibration. He claimed that if one could calculate the correct vibration of the virus, one could match it and smash the vibration in the same way he had caused the building to crumble years before. This spectacle Mother's interest more than any other article. The next thing I knew, vibrational reader and healer had been added to her list of talents on the front sign. Her vibrational readings became extremely popular. Her readings were always preceded by the story of how she and her girls had been caught in the freakish earthquake of 1898 and met the great Tesla. She embellished on how the brilliant side Tesla had imparted her the secret of harnessing the earthly vibratory patterns, adding that Tesla had studied under Swami Vivekananda. She had found a picture of the Swami in a magazine and framed it, and she put it out in the parlor beside the scientific manual. I never saw her open. I half expected her to autograph it to my good friend Maud Love Swami V, but she didn't. The vibrational readings consisted of Mother tracing the outlines of her clients at their hand's length and his or her body. From this, she would make all sorts of predictions, most of them medical, based on the vibrations she was detecting. I couldn't make any sense of it, but these readings became all the rage, and customers lined up in our front yard, especially during the summer months. She was, one might say, the queen bee of the town, occupied predominantly by mostly single women. Feminist feelings were strong, and it was probably added to the lack of male presence. There were a few men who were participating psychics, most of them elderly. And in terms of young men my own age, I was due to be 16 in April 15 of that year. There were a few, but nobody who interested me romantically. At 18, Mimi was easily the most beautiful female in Spiritvale, with her dark, luxurious hair piled up high on her head, and her dresses clinched to accentuate her tiny waist. I was still the plain brown sparrow next to her glossy raven beauty. I had taken to wearing my shoulder-length brown hair up in a high bun atop my head, as she did, but I could never match her dramatic, abundant locks. Just the same, I didn't mind, content to bask in the shadow of her glory. Men who came in with the summer crowd always looked twice when they saw her walking down the street. She claimed to pay no attention to them, but more than once I caught her looking back quickly before averting her eyes modestly. I couldn't blame her. Living in Spirit was like being in a convent. Mimi, I knew, couldn't wait to leave. I had kept up my interest in Tesla by scouring the newspapers in the dusty, small, dimly lit Spiritvale library. I learned that after we had seen him in New York, he had moved to Colorado Springs and built a huge radio tower. He claimed that the tower had received signals he thought must be from extraterrestrial beings living on Mars or Venus. I did not find this hard to believe. In Spiritvale, people regularly claim to get signals from locals much farther than outer space. He had invented something called a telescope, meant to aid in communicating with other planets. In the Yellowing issue, dated 1900, I read that he had left Colorado Springs. The article alluded to a suspicious fire in his lab, and that his equipment had all been sold because he was deeply in debt. Then, in the issue from later in 1900, I learned that he had built another huge transmission tower in Long Island, New York, in a town called Sorham. He had found a wealthy backer and lawyer named James S. Warden, who backed him this time. The tower was thus called the Wardenclyffe Tower. Many other wealthy financiers were funding the project as well. I cheered silently for my hero and the father figure who had saved me from the shaking ground. He hadn't been down for too long. In 1905, he invented something called the Tesla coil and the Tesla turbine. But I continued to read as I continued on my readings, I saw that by the end of 1905, his tower had been shut down because his backers had lost faith in it. By 1908, the property had been foreclosed by the bank. All these articles, and favorable and disappointing, I clipped and kept them in a scrapbook. To what purpose, I wasn't sure. I think that secretly I harbored the fantasy of one day meeting the great man again, and showing him that I had followed his career. I also, on a more practical note, was beginning to think I might like to become a journalist someday, and thought perhaps Tesla could be my first subject. It was by the summer that I also discovered a tall, dusty stack of British magazines, The Strand. The Spiritvale Library collection went back to 1901. While perusing it, fascinated by the comical fashions of the decade just past, it came across an installment of a detective story called The Hounds of Baskerville. I couldn't stop staring at the colorful drawings on the cover of the magazine. The main part of it showed a scene from the story, but in the right corner, in a red outline circled, there was a close-up drawing of the story's main character, Sherlock Holmes. He was Tesla. He looked just exactly like him. With his sharp features and piercing eyes, I could hardly believe it. Settling down to read, I soon discovered that the story inside was not disappointing. It featured a detective of supreme logic who noticed everything and worked out his solutions with the cool attention to detail undetained by emotion or superstition. His name was Sherlock Holmes. I couldn't get enough of Sherlock Holmes. He was irate and polite, brave, and even witty at times, and so smart, a genius. I knew a real genius, of course, was the author, Arthur Conan Doyle. But it was not him I mourned over, it was the fictional character. One hot afternoon in 1911, I scanned the papers while Mother was inside trying to contact a spirit for the husband and wife client, the Haitian couple from the Spiritvale. I was sprawled out, my legs dangling from the end of the front porch swinging, when Mimi approached me at a fast clip. I've been distracted from my Tesla search by the article about the largest cruise ship ever built. It had been constructed in Ireland by the British White Star Line. It was to be the 4 city block long buildings, built for luxury and remarkably unsinkable. I was so engrossed in imagining it, I didn't notice my older sister until she was right in front of me. Glancing up, I saw instantly that she was in a state of agitation. "What's wrong?" I asked, laying my newspaper aside. She plucked down on the front step. "Oh, it's just so strange. I had to get away," she cried. We had become so accustomed to the strange that for Mimi to find anything this unsettling was out of the ordinary, garnered by interest and attention. I came down onto the step beside her. "What's strange?" She told me that a couple had arrived this morning. They are dark-skinned Africans and about middle-aged and appeared to be a husband and wife. They were in a motor car. Although I knew from the newspapers and magazines that automobiles had been around for a few years, they were just starting to show up in Spiritville. And it was still a cause for excitement. "Did you see it?" I asked, eager for every detail. "Yes, but that wasn't the strange part," she replied. The couple parked their Model T Ford and were heading for a reading at Madame Ansak's, the medium from Russia, who had said to have studied magic under Rasputin himself. They had just gone out, and I stopped, curious to see the motor car, Mimi said. The woman looked over her shoulder and noticed me. She suddenly turned around and stared right at me, as though I had terrified her. She clutched her husband's arm and thought she was about to faint. In my mind, I was tickering off the details in an effort to be like Sherlock Holmes. Black African couple, they had a motor car, locks with my sister in a piercing stare. "What happened next?" I asked. She kept staring at me, and staring at me as though she knew me, Mimi recalled. I just rushed away. I can't tell you how she unnerved me. "Who unnerved you?" The 12-year-old Brythe came up the path wearing a pretty white ruffled frock. Her blonde ringlets were tied back in a pink satin ribbon. Even at 12, Brythe believed that appearance counted, and she was determined to become someone of note. Mimi once again relayed that she had told me. "Oh," Bryce said, "I know what you mean. She was asking Madame Ansak about you." They came out on Madame Ansank's porch as I was going by. "Madame asked me to come get you." Mimi's hands crossed her chest and in alarm surprised me. Just then Mother appeared on the porch with her clients. "Thank you again, Miss Ornita Taylor." When the woman gushed red eyes from crying. "Your words have become such comfort." "Pleased to have helped," Mother said, as her husband handed her a stack of cash. As our clients went down the path away from the house, Mother said very Brythe and my serious expression in Mimi's stricken one. "What is going on?" she asked. Brythe excitedly told her what happened. As she spoke, Mother slowly grew so pale that she could have been a spirit herself. "Come inside, Mimi," Mother said firmly, blending and pulling my sister up. "There's no need to see this woman. Stay home until she's gone." But Madame Oshnak said for her to come, Brythe protested. "What should I tell her?" "Tell her your sister went to Niagara Falls on the sightseeing trip," Mother replied with an agitated wave of her hand. "Tell her she'll be gone for the rest of the month." Mimi resisted her mother's pulls on her arm. "Mother, what's going on?" she demanded. "It's nothing. You need to know," Mother insisted. "Nothing at all. Come inside. You too, Jane. Inside right now, and go straight to your room. Do not come out until I say you may. And Brythe, gather Amelie and Emila, and then return here as soon as you give the message of Madame Ansanka." "Why are we being punished?" Brythe demanded. "It's not fair." "I have my reasons." Mother marched us inside. We are full of questions, but the silence of us turning away and pointing to the stairs. We obediently ascended through, though in minutes we had crawled out the window and were sitting side by side on the back porch roof, outside the bedroom we shared. "I have to know," Mimi said restlessly. "Mother is dead set against it," I reminded her, as I wrapped my arms around my knees. "Why should she be?" Mimi demanded. I furrowed my brows thoughtfully. I wondered why the stranger wants to see you so badly. Why does Mother not want me to see her so badly? Emma came out on the roof with Amelie beside her. "There you are," said Emma, seating herself beside Mimi. At 14, the twins, with their widowy long limbs, with straight, blonde, brown hair, and you would never hold it curled no matter how long you wrapped it in rags and wound it around the hot curling tongs. Their greatest beauty was their 4 identical, limpid violet blue eyes, surrounded by incredibly long dark lashes. After some time, Brythe climbed out to join us. "Mother is arguing with Madame Ansanka," she reported. "She said her clients are in front now with Mother." That was it. We had to know what this was about. One by one, the 5 of us descended the rose tristel and was attached to the ground on the porch roof, fairly well demolishing Mother's yellow roses, and scurried along the side of the house to peer around the corner to see. "If it's true," she said. "That's right to know." Madame Ansaka was insisting in her thick Russian accent. The black woman was dressed elegantly in a yellow dress with a black lace trim. She wore a quite spectacular matching hat above her dark, attractive face. Her husband seemed somewhat older than her. He too was dressed well in a summer suit. The woman spoke in a melodic French accent. I would only like to see that girl for the briefest moment," she pleaded. "I've told you, she is gone." Mother held fast to her lie. Mimi shocked us all by stepping forward from the hidden spot. Mother placed her hand on her cheek and hung her head beaten. The moment Mimi stood beside the woman in the yellow dress, I drew in the sharpest gasp of surprise. Except for the difference in color of the skin, Mimi was the younger version of this woman. They shared the same luxurious mane of black hair. They were very close in height and of similar slim build, and large black eyes were exactly the same. "Marguerite?" the woman called, calling Mimi by her given name. Mimi nodded curiously. The woman turned to her husband and spoke excitedly in French. She turned back to Mimi. "Marguerite, you do not know me because I have not seen you since you were an infant." "You know me?" Mimi asked. The woman nodded. "When I saw you on the street, I thought I had seen a ghost of my sister." She laughed in an embarrassed way. "I thought you were so pale because you were dead. But by the time I reached Madame Ansanka, I had done the mathematics and figured it out. I came here to find my sister's spirit. Your spirit led me to you. I am your aunt, Univone. Your mother was my sister." Mimi's head snapped around to find Mother. We all looked at her as she stood with tears over brimming in her eyes. "It's true," she whispered.